All right, thank you very much, everyone. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully that will work. Hopefully you can see my screen. Thank you very much, Zara. Yes, so my name is Lilangi Jayasuriya, and I'm the Secondary Systems Engineering Manager of Metro Trains Melbourne. Before I start, I just want to say thank you very much to the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka, the Women in Engineering Division, for giving me the opportunity to speak with you all today. It's really been a highlight, and thank you very much. So yeah, as Zara said, my speech is about the challenges and opportunities in a career in engineering. So I just thought I'd start with a little bit of background on who I am. So I was born in Sri Lanka and I arrived in Australia at 18 months. So I was just a baby when I arrived. But I'm very much from an engineering family. Both of my parents are engineers. So my father is a civil engineer and my mother is a mechanical engineer. And basically almost everyone in my family is an engineer, starting from my grandfather, who was actually the general manager of the State Engineering Corporation in Sri Lanka in the 1970s. In terms of women engineers, I would say that my biggest influences were really my mother, who actually was one of the first women in Sri Lanka to study mechanical engineering at the University of Moratuwa. And also my auntie, who's my father's sister, who was a very, very strong civil and structural engineer who graduated from the Peradeniya University. So I myself studied electrical engineering and computer science at the University of Melbourne. After I graduated, I then worked in City Power and Powerco, which is an electricity distribution company, for 13 years. And I'll describe a little bit about my roles throughout the presentation. But in general, my roles were a graduate engineer to start with, and then I went to protection and control engineer, senior protection and control engineer, and then acting team leader of the secondary design group. In 2019, I then moved to Metro Trains in Melbourne, where I was a senior substation engineer and also the secondary systems engineering manager, which is my current role at the moment. I'm also married to another electrical engineer, and we have two children. I have my daughter, Sehara, who's age 7, and my son, Vinith, who's age 5. I'm just going to show you my photo here on the right-hand side. You can see from a very young age, my parents are very influential in terms of engineering. I'm probably around 3 years old here, and my mother and my grandmother have taken me to the University of Melbourne to see the engineering faculty. So you can see I was influenced from the start. Before I explain what I do in terms of my job, it's kind of very important to understand what kind of equipment we deal with when we talk about substations. So generally, when we talk about substations, we think about things like circuit breakers. So I've got some pictures there of AC circuit breakers and DC circuit breakers. You also think about transformers that transform the voltage from a very high voltage to low voltages. In my work currently, we think about rectifiers that transform the electricity from AC to DC. Overhead lines, you see them a lot when you're driving in the freeway or on the road, or even like things like wind farms and solar farms, which are the kind of renewable energy sources that we have in Australia. But all of these are really considered to be primary equipment. But what I deal with is what we call secondary equipment. So to understand what that is, what I can say is that primary equipment is always subject to failure or faults, very similar to the electronic devices in your house. All of those primary equipment have failure from time to time. So when we think about secondary equipment, it really consists of the electronic devices that are used to control and protect these large items of plant, and they're typically called protection and control relays. So these devices actually measure current and voltage continuously, and they monitor the electrical network. If they see any errors in the network, they'll then open circuit breakers and isolate a fault and stop the current from flowing. The aim of protection systems is really to minimize the damage to those kind of primary plant that I showed in the previous slide, and also to minimize the number of customers that are impacted. So we're always trying to think about how many people will be impacted by a fault and how we can minimize those numbers. So whenever I'm at a dinner party or something like that, I always explain my job very simply as very similar to a trip switch that you might see in your house. So if you think about your house, if someone goes and puts a knife in the toaster or in the power socket or something like that, the first thing that will happen is the trip switch will open and that will break the current and break the fault. It also gives you some kind of alarm or indication. So when you open your meter board, you'll be able to see which section of the circuit is off, and you'll know that there was something wrong in your kitchen or in your TV room or whatever it was. So it's very similar in a big electrical network. The only difference is it's the relays in the electrical network that are monitoring these types of faults, and the alarms go back to a big control room, which is continuously monitored on a 24-hour basis. So the controllers in the control room are constantly looking at these kind of alarms in the electrical network and trying to minimize the number of customers that are experiencing the outage. So the type of work that I do involves a high level of maths and calculations and a lot of programming skills and logic design as well. So I always tell my graduates, the best thing about protection and control is it's really the place where everything that we learned in electrical engineering really comes to life, and it's very, very interesting. The designs that we do at my work are also tested in a lab environment where we inject current and voltages and simulate the types of faults we might see on the network. But we also conduct all of these types of tests in the field as well. So you can see some of the photos there of the testing that we do. A lot of the testing that happens on the metro trains network actually happens at night. So we can't actually do any of our testing until the trains are not operating. So in Melbourne, the train system operates until midnight and then starts again at 4 a.m. So that's actually the window that we can do a lot of our testing. So a lot of this testing happens at night. In the next few slides, I'll just explain a little bit about my career and the different roles that I had and some of the learnings that I had kind of along the way. So the first position that I had was as a graduate engineer in City Power and Powerco. So City Power and Powerco are Victoria's largest electricity distribution company. They deliver electricity to 1.1 million customers, which includes the inner CBD of Melbourne and also the rural network of Western Victoria. So you can see the picture there I have of the inner CBD of Melbourne. You can see all the lights, and all of those are from City Power's network. And you can also see there the MCG, which is one of our biggest customers. In terms of Western Victoria, we're talking about a very rural network. So we're supplying a lot of industry, a lot of farms, and a lot of like rural customers in that sense. So I was involved in a 3-year graduate program from 2007 till 2009. And I was rotated in that program for 1 year at a time through the Technical Standards Group, the Network Reliability and Asset Strategy Group, and the Secondary Design Group. So when we talk about challenges, for a very young engineer, I think the very first challenge that you'll always have is the high level of technical knowledge that you need to actually do your role. I mean, I can remember when I first got my contract, actually, it said on the contract that you work 37.5 hours. And I remember my auntie asking me, how many hours does it say you work? And I said, yeah, 37.5 hours. And she said, but you won't be working those 37.5 hours. You'll be working much longer because you really, in your first few years need to prove yourself and prove what you can actually do. And she was absolutely right. And I always tell this to my young engineers as well. It's not necessarily really about the number of hours that you put in, but the amount of effort that you put in really shines through when you're in your younger years. I always say that it's very important for people to make sure that you really learn those technical skills and really ask a lot of questions, spend the time learning the technical knowledge in those younger years. When you start as a young engineer, you also start working with a diverse range of people, which is very, very new to any type of engineer. So in my situation, I actually worked in one group where I had a line worker actually working with the engineers. And that was actually very different for me because the way that I guess he operated and the way that he spoke and everything was quite different to what I kind of expected. And the kind of jokes that he said and the nicknames and everything were really, really different. But throughout the year, I worked very closely with him, asked him a lot of questions, and I realized that there's really a lot of value in having these different types of people working with you because they can give you a perspective that not really any other engineer can give you, given coming from that kind of field environment. And I think that's really, really valuable. Similarly, for a lot of young engineers, I remember when we first started, there was a huge age gap between the people of my kind of age range and then the next people up, which were really my parents' age, so 50 or 60 years old. And that can be very daunting for young people as well when they first start. But again, I would really encourage people to make sure you you kind of use the experience of those other older people and really learn from them, because that kind of experience you really can't get just from reading a textbook. It's really years of experience, and they can really help you out in the long term. The other challenge is really working on real projects. So one of the groups that I was in, it was just me and like a lot of older people who are very, very experienced. So, and in that group, it was just the standard thing for the manager to give all the big projects to all those older people and much more experienced people. And for me, they used to just tell me, you just need to absorb your knowledge from those older people. But really, there's no way for a young engineer to absorb knowledge. The only way that they can really learn is by being given real projects from the start. So I really encourage, if you're a manager or if you're a team leader, thinking about giving your young engineers real projects with real responsibility from the start, so that they can just really learn about those kind of, about the work that's required, and just ask their seniors when they have questions. So in terms of the opportunities though in the graduate program, there were just so many opportunities because of the rotation program that they set up for us. So because we rotated across many different areas of the business, we learned so much about how the business worked, about the different functions and how they all interplay and work together for this electricity network to work. And it's very interesting because for a young engineer, it then gives you the opportunity to understand what each function does. And if you have a question, you then know exactly who to speak to. So it's actually a really great way to set up young engineers, I believe. Also, because we worked with so many such experienced engineers, we really had a big opportunity to work with these industry experts. So it's such a great way to learn when you're doing these kind of rotation programs as well. And throughout this graduate program, because we were able to try those different areas, we then were able to decide exactly which area would really suit us before we gained a permanent role within the business. So for me, that area was protection and control. So from 2009 or 2010 to 2018, I was actually a protection and control engineer. So just to give you an idea of the kind of project responsibility that I had, we would do any type of substation upgrade. So if they said they wanted to upgrade the transformers, the circuit breakers, sometimes it would be a full new substation or a new zone substation, or a rebuild of an existing substation, or even a control room rebuild, we would be responsible for those kind of tasks. I was also involved very heavily in protection relay upgrades. So these projects are ones that I ran myself. I was also involved in a lot of wind farm and solar farm connections in the last few years that I was in this group, because there was a huge push from the Victorian government to connect a lot of renewable energy into our grid, which was very, very interesting. Wind farm and solar farms add a whole new dynamic to the way that the electricity grid operates. So it's very interesting. I was also involved in a lot of design, and I did a lot of relay programming and testing, like what I showed you in the previous pictures. In terms of the challenges in this role, what I would say is the biggest thing is really gaining respect from the field staff. So in this particular role as a protection and control engineer, you often have field workers or testers who are out somewhere in the rural network giving you a call in the middle of like the day saying, oh, I can't fix this, something's gone wrong. Can you tell me what's wrong with this relay? And it's really good to have that kind of rapport with these people and really have that respect, so that they know that if they give you a call, you'll be able to answer the question quickly and be able to give them the right answer the first time. So the best thing I can suggest for a young person to get this kind of interaction with the field staff and get that kind of rapport with them, I guess, is really to attend site as much as possible. We were always encouraged when we did a scope or any type of new scoping activity to always attend with a field person and to ask them exactly how they would build the job, how they would operate the equipment, and how they would interact with the equipment that we were actually building. And I think that meant that our projects were a lot more successful because we had that interaction and that direct interaction with the field people, and we had an idea of exactly how they would think about the project as well. In terms of the other opportunities, I guess, in this group, the best thing I can say about this group was really the diversity of the group. I mean, I've shown a lot of pictures here, but if you look at the picture at the bottom there, you can see that the group is actually made up of a diverse range of people. So if you think about in terms of cultural diversity, you can see that Amy and myself are both Sri Lankan, Vesna is Yugoslavian, Paul is Greek, and Vikram is Indian, and the rest are Australian. So you have a very diverse cultural spread there. In addition to that, you also have age diversity. So if you have a look, there's graduate engineers who are kind of the 20 or 30-year level, all the way up to very senior engineers who are around 70 years old. So having that diversity of age really gives you a really good mix in terms of experience and the kind of opinions and ideas that come into the way that the group functions. You also have gender diversity, which was really good in this group. Like at this time, this photo was actually taken in 2016. A lot of groups probably only had men in them, or maybe you had just one woman in each group. But our group really had 3 women, which was excellent, and so many men. So that kind of gender diversity really added a lot. And these kind of different levels of diversity, I believe, really contributed to this team being a very high performing team and working really well together. And it was an excellent group to be part of. In addition to that, the 2 senior engineers in this group really set up the culture and the training for us so well in this group. And I really have learned a lot from the way that they trained us in terms of how I now operate my group at the moment. They were very involved in giving us big projects from the start and giving us a lot of responsibility. And then they would kind of just sit back and give us the support and guidance needed to fulfill those projects. So that was such a great way to learn for a young engineer, being thrown into those big projects right from the start and given that kind of responsibility. During my time in this group, I also had the opportunity to do a lot of higher studies. So I completed my master's, so my postgraduate education, and I also completed my chartered engineer program with the Institution of Engineers Australia as well. And I would really recommend for any young engineer, if you get the opportunity to do any type of postgraduate study or anything like the chartered program, definitely to take it, because you don't always get these opportunities, and it definitely will be worthwhile for your career going forward. So in 2018, we had a bit of a disaster. So we had a restructure in that year. Actually, my company went through many restructures before this, but luckily the protection and control group was always kind of saved, and we never had to, we never restructured in terms of our own group. But in 2018, we had a major challenge where 2 members of our group were actually asked to leave. So what they told us was that they were not going to nominate the 2 people, but really they wanted us to decide which 2 members of the group were going to leave. So basically at this time, we really all loved working together, and none of us wanted to leave this group because it was so great. So basically everyone kind of took a step back as soon as they said that 2 people had to leave. But I can still remember my friend Vesna said to me, so she's circled there in the picture, she said to me, if you're ready to leave, I'll leave with you. And that actually changed my mindset completely. The whole time before that, I was thinking, this is so bad. I don't want to leave. I don't want to have to change anything. But as soon as she said that, suddenly we both started looking at this restructure as an opportunity for us. So the idea was that we wouldn't have to leave the group, but they actually told us that we'd be moving to another group, which was a design group. And we both started looking at that design group and looking at the types of projects that they were doing and thinking, well, maybe this will be good for us. Maybe if we go there, we'll actually end up as leaders in that group, and this would actually be better for us. And so we started looking at that change in a really different way. And I really think that that was a really great example of how something looks so negative to start off with, but really you can change it into something quite positive. So basically, Vesna and I did go and we joined the secondary design group. And one of the great things about joining this group was that we weren't now only working on internal projects within PowerCore, but now we were exposed to a lot of external projects as well. So previously I mentioned I worked on a lot of zone substation work, a lot of substation rebuilds, but now I was exposed to terminal station work. So you can see the photo in the corner there, that's at that time, that was one of Victoria's largest transformers. at Elaine Terminal Station. So we were exposed to a lot of projects, but very big scope, and a lot more people and a lot more different designers and things like that that we were interacting with. So in terms of the challenges, obviously because it was a design group and they had so much work, it was a very, very high volume of work, and the timeframes were very short. In design consultancy or any type of design group, it's very different to when you're kind of the network owner. So a lot of the performance indicators were really driven by efficiency and utilization of the staff. So it was a very high volume workload environment. We also took on a lot of, I took on a lot of leadership and senior role kind of responsibility, even without the title. So even though my title was still secondary designer, I started taking on things like team meetings. I would do one-on-ones with different people in the group. And I would do all kind of the resource planning and things like that. So suddenly I was definitely thrown into an environment where I was taking on a lot of responsibility, but I was still not really given the title, I guess. But in terms of opportunities, the great thing, as I mentioned before, was that now we were getting exposed to these external projects, but we were also getting exposed to a larger network of people. So we were meeting new people. We were really getting more known within the business, I guess. As I mentioned before, I also had a lot of leadership opportunities, and this was really excellent for me. This is the first time I really learned to plan resources, look at how much time projects take, what the costs of projects were, and exactly how many people we needed. I was also exposed to being able to develop people. So I started developing training plans for people and working out what types of training we needed to do and how we could really kind of make this team really perform higher, I guess. I was also then promoted to senior engineer in 2019. And then when my team leader left, I was made acting team leader. And I was lucky enough to be the team leader to more than 20 protection and control engineers, which was a great experience. I really loved working in this group. So then in 2019, there was another turning point. So this time, really, I think this is a great example of how much your own network really does make a difference in your career. So I always tell my graduates, whenever you interact with anyone in the workplace, you should always think about, at one point, you may be managing that person, they may be managing you at another point in your life. Every time you meet someone, you never know how your interaction with them will change. So you should always make a good impression on them. And this was a good example of that, because I had met someone when I was doing a Metro Trains job, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And he came up to me in 2019 at the start saying, well, I think Metro Trains is going through a huge change. We're having a lot of work come on, and we feel like we really need a protection and control engineer, and we think you can do the job. And I had never thought of moving companies at this stage. It was a completely different thing to me. So the biggest challenge, first of all, for me was the fact that I was leaving the company that I had been with since I was a graduate engineer. I didn't mention in my previous slides, but even, I went through my maternity leave. I had 2 years of maternity leave in this company. I had gotten married in the time that I was with this company. It was really almost like my second home. And I couldn't believe that I was thinking of even leaving. I had to leave my friends, and obviously I had to leave my team as well, which was something that I really thought a long time about, because I really loved working with them so much. But in terms of the opportunity that this provided me, it now made me see that I could have, a new level of responsibility. And also, by moving to this organization, because they didn't really have a protection and control engineer before, it meant that I'd be making a big change to that organization and the way that they kind of operated as well, which was a huge opportunity in my eyes. Also, it meant that I would now be working on big government projects. So these government projects are billion-dollar projects. It was nothing like what I had worked on before. They have so many different inputs, so many different stakeholders, and really big budget projects. And there was so many projects coming on in the future as well that it seemed like an excellent opportunity for me. And one of the great things that actually happened throughout this process is, so there was probably a few months where I was trying to decide whether this was a good idea of leaving my company or not. But the best thing that happened to me at this stage is that I had meetings with my senior engineers, I had meetings with my manager, and even with my general manager on this. And all of them were so supportive of me taking the next step in my career. And I feel like that's such a great thing. Like, instead of just saying to me, oh no, we really like you, we want you to stay in our company because you're doing a lot of great work, they were really thinking about my career moving forward. And I think that was so wonderful from their point of view to do that. So I was really happy with the level of support that I got from my leaders within PowerCore at that stage. So then I moved to Metro Trains and I became a senior substation engineer. So just to give you guys an idea of what Metro Trains does, Metro Trains operates and maintains Melbourne's train network. We run 226 six-carriage trains across 998 kilometres of track, and we transport 450,000 customers each day. We have 15 lines and 222 stations, and we service our customers 7 days of the week. So our trains run all of the time, except for between 12 midnight and 4 a.m. really. In terms of diversity, Metro Trains has really worked a lot on women, getting more women into the workforce. And they've actually increased the percentage of women in the last 5 years from 12 to 27%, which is a really significant increase when you think about a workforce of something like 7,000 people. They've been focusing a lot on different types of areas where women normally don't consider working in. So it's very interesting in terms of train drivers. That's one of the big areas that they've focused on recently. They have now got up to 1 in every 3 train drivers as a woman. So I think that's a really great thing in terms of diversity, because it's a real area that a lot of women would just never think about. They're also focusing a lot on the operations and maintenance staff, because again, generally these groups tend to be all men, and women just never think about working in them, but they're really trying to increase the percentages there as well. So in terms of the challenges in this role, obviously, like, I had worked in PowerCore for so long that coming to this network was a huge challenge for me. So first of all, I had only worked in AC networks, and suddenly this was a fully DC network. The train network runs on 1500 volts DC. So it was a completely new network. And suddenly my function was actually very small, because I was used to being an electrical engineer in an electricity company, so you were the main function. But all of a sudden here, I was an electrical engineer providing power to the trains, but there were so many other functions involved. There was the people working on the track, there's people working on the signals, there's people working on the structures. So it's really like a very different environment for an electrical engineer to go into, because suddenly you have a lot of responsibility, but you're not the main focus anymore. And because of the fact that they had never had someone focusing on my secondary engineering function before, suddenly I had a lot more responsibility as well. Almost every job had to go through me, because there's just no one else there. So it wasn't like when I was in PowerCore, I was probably working between, it was me and maybe 30 other protection and control engineers. Suddenly I came into Metro Trains and I was the only one in this function. So, but the opportunities that this role gave me were that I was able to completely change the way that my group operated and also interacted with others. So we tried to work a lot on like the way that we interact with other groups in terms of the way we approach them, the way that how quickly we kind of turn around requests and things like that as well. We also put in a whole new system in terms of standardization to help the designers. So we have a lot of external design consultants work on the traction network. So we've put in a whole new system of standardization in terms of how we design our substations to help the designers always do kind of the same thing, so we don't have to pick up on errors all the time. I've made so many new connections, because when you're in this kind of rail environment, you work with so many different types of parties that it's a really great way to kind of increase your brand and really get to know people within the industry. Because it's a new area, they also sent me to a lot of leadership courses. They've sent me to many conferences and also training courses as well. So it's been really excellent in terms of a development point of view. And because this became such a big area in terms of secondary systems engineering, in the end, they actually created a new team or function for me. So I was very lucky in that sense. So this is my current role. So my current role is a secondary systems engineering manager at Metro Trains. So in terms of the challenges in this role, because of the number of projects that we have coming on board in the next few years, it's just been a huge forecast increase in workload. Like there's been so much work coming up, and we're looking really to build our resources and make sure that we hire more and more people to be able to deal with this increase in workload. A very big kind of skill shortage within the rail industry in terms of electrical engineers. So I've had something like 6 graduates maybe in the last 2 years. So I've had to train them very quickly to be able to actually be able to do work within the time of their rotation. So they only rotate, they have probably 5 or 6 months with me. So I have to train them extremely quickly to be able to actually deliver work within that 6-month period. I've also been able to deal with a large number of stakeholders. So now we're talking about the government, we're talking about different design consultants, we're talking about our maintenance group and also our commissioning group. So there's a lot of people to interact with there and a lot of people to deal with and different ways of doing things as well. So those have been kind of the challenges, I guess. In terms of opportunities though, I've been able to build a very high performing team. So I'm currently recruiting a few more people to join my team. And I feel like I'm really making use of all the things that I learned when I was in those protection and control areas about diversity, about the gender diversity, the cultural diversity, and the age diversity when I'm actually building my team at the moment. I'm also thinking about all the development training that I had, all the kind of things that I was thinking about when I was developing people within that secondary design team, when I create training opportunities for my team now, because I have a lot of younger engineers with me who don't know as much about protection and control. So I'm really looking about how can I develop these people into very strong engineers. The great thing about this position really is that I've now become an industry leader on projects on the Victorian government's biggest projects. So similar to what was mentioned at the start, so I now work on the Airport Rail project, which is a new train line to the Melbourne Airport, and also the Metro Tunnel project, which is a new underground rail loop in the Melbourne city. So currently we have 1 underground rail loop, and after this project, it will be 2. So it's a really great opportunity for me in terms of now every single design that has anything to do with substations really has to go through my group and me before approval. So it's excellent to be part of those projects. In the next few slides, I just wanted to explain a few other things that I've done other than my technical work. So one of the things that I was heavily involved in was the Association of Sri Lankan Engineers Australia. So I was the event coordinator for this group from 2008 to 2010. And in that time, we actually set up something called the Power Corps Sri Lankan Student Sponsorship Program. So where we sponsored 2 students. You can see the pictures of them both there. So one was Suboda Ireshika. She was from the University of Ruhuna, and Surya Bandara, who was from, I think, the University of Peradeniya. And I'm really, and these, we actually, as part of this sponsorship program, gave the students, I think it was something like $500 every year for each year of their engineering degree. And I'm really proud to say that both of these 2 have really excelled in their career, and I've been able to keep in contact with them for many years now. So Suboda is actually a lecturer at the University of Ruhuna right now. She did her master's in Norway, and she's also reading for her PhD at the moment. So I'm really proud of what she's achieved. Similarly, Surya has also done his PhD, and I believe he was working for Rolls-Royce in Singapore last time that I checked. So that's really excellent to see. I was also part of the Electrical Engineering Society of Australia for many years. I was the site visit organizer, so I saw that your organisation also does many site visits for engineers. I also organised a lot of technical site visits in that time, and I was also their treasurer. I'm a very big advocate for the Metro graduate program, and I also actually run my own graduate training program within Metro, where we do kind of lunchtime learn sessions, maybe every week on different technical topics. So for example, I would talk about protection and control. My colleagues would talk about the other areas that they're very heavily involved in. So we run these sessions to help our graduates get a base level of knowledge even before they enter our team, basically. I've also been part of a lot of women in engineering groups. So while I was in Power Core, we used to have kind of monthly or maybe a meeting every 3 months with our general manager, where we would talk about different issues in terms of diversity and issues that we would come up with in the workplace, which was really good because we had that direct interaction with our general manager on a regular basis. I was also involved in some presentations where we kind of spoke about the work that we did and what an engineer is to a lot of high school girls, to kind of try to inspire them to join engineering and think about these kind of STEM or engineering careers as a good career path. Last year, I was also involved in Metro International Women's Day. Again, we had some high school girls join this day where we had different people from all over the organization. Actually, we had women from every area, including like one of the train drivers as well in my group. So we had high school girls there as well, and we would kind of explain to them the types of careers that Metro has for women, which was really excellent. So my last slide is really just about work-life balance. Especially in this kind of COVID time, I think it's very good to highlight the kind of mental load that you have as a woman. So just to kind of explain my kind of mental load, I work more than 50 hours a week, definitely. And you can see like some of the kind of alerts that I get from, I think it's Cortana. I don't know if all of you use Microsoft Outlook and Teams. Because of all of those things being integrated so well together, they know exactly everything that you're doing every minute of the day, basically. And there was 1 month that I got this alert that said I had 0 quiet days in the month. And again, another month that said that I was only able to focus 10% of my time because the other 90% I was collaborating, which really means that I was jumping between Microsoft Teams meetings. So it can get very hectic being an electrical engineer, definitely. But in addition to working, and for a woman, you're generally thinking about a lot of other things all the time as well. So you're thinking about your kids, you're managing your kids' schoolwork, you're thinking about what you're going to cook for dinner in the night, you're thinking about the cleaning and the washing. And then in addition to all that, you're managing all the social outings and everything else that has to happen in life as well. So it can get quite hectic. So sometimes I do look like this lady in the picture here. But what I would say in this situation is the best thing I can say in terms of advice is really just to ask for help when you need it. So in my situation, the best thing that was right for me and my family was that my mother actually decided that she would retire when I had my 2 kids and that I should go back full time to work. So she actually does a lot of stuff for me. She does all the kind of pickups from school. She gives my kids dinner in the night. She does a lot of helping them with their homework and things like that. And that was just right for my family. But for other people, it might be better to do things like do part-time work. So you might work 3 days a week and then 2 days you're at home. Or for other people, it might be better to do a lot of working from home, like maybe work from home 2 days a week and go to work 3 days a week. I really think that people should do whatever is right for them. So they shouldn't really be looking at other people and thinking, oh, how do they do all that kind of stuff? Just do whatever is right for you, because that's the only way that you can really to manage all of this kind of load that you have as a woman. I'm also a big advocate for physical health and exercise. So especially during this COVID time, quite often I found that I would sit down at my desk at 9 o'clock and I wouldn't get up again until 5:30. And after some time, that was actually giving me some kind of back problems and things like that. So I really think that it's very important for people to try to do some kind of physical health or exercise every day. I try to, on weekends, go running. I find that really, really good for not only my physical health, but also my mental kind of, just to be able to check out. It's kind of like meditation for me, I suppose. So I really think that some kind of physical health and exercise is really, really good for everybody. Equally, I think it's very good to focus on your mental health. So I know that a lot of people do things like meditation or yoga or Pilates to just kind of check out from what can be a very stressful life, especially being an engineer, being so technical and doing so many technical tasks. Sometimes your brain just gets tired, I think. So I always think it's very good to really think about your mental health and make sure that you're relaxing, and also have interests outside of work. So I've just shown a picture there of my son's 5th birthday. I personally really love, making cakes and organizing all the desserts and party bags for my kids' birthday parties. But I mean, I'm sure that every engineer has something else that they really love to do. And I really think that you should try to use that kind of creative side of your brain, or do things that you're really interested in outside of work as well, because that will really help you. So just to summarize, what I would say is, while you're young, if you're a young engineer, really take the time to learn the technical skills and ask as many questions as possible, because that's the best time for you to learn. In terms of taking opportunities, make sure you take those opportunities even if they seem scary at the start. So you can see there was different times in my career where I really felt like, oh my gosh, this seems too scary. But really at the end, it was quite fulfilling. So I really recommend taking those opportunities when you can. Every position that you have is a learning opportunity. So sometimes you might think that you're stepping back in a certain way, but really every time you take a new opportunity, you will meet new people, you will make new connections, and really you will always be expanding your network and your knowledge. So every opportunity is really a learning opportunity. Make sure you do something that you really enjoy. Like, I really, really love the work that I do. I love analyzing these kind of fault currents, looking at the different calculations and understanding how circuits work. And I really think that everyone should really try to do things that they enjoy, because that really increases your chances of excelling in your career. I think you should really be yourself and be authentic. I think people always respect people who are honest and approachable, and really passionate about what they do. So don't try to be someone you're not. If you see someone else in the workplace and you think, oh, that's how I should be to be a manager or whatever, I really think you should just be yourself, because that's really important. And then the last one is really just to take the time for yourself and think about your other interests outside of work as well, because that's also helps you with a fulfilling career. And I think if you do all of that stuff, you're really set for a very enjoyable and rewarding career in engineering. So thank you very much. I'm really happy to celebrate International Women's Day with you. And I've just put the tagline for, I'm not sure if it's the world one, but the Australian International Women's Day was also all about choosing to challenge. So thank you very much.